The homeless man had been bleeding for hours, but when he stumbled into the emergency room, the security guard immediately moved to escort him out. "We don't serve his kind here," the receptionist whispered. But what they didn't know was that the blood on his torn jacket wasn't from a street fight. It was from a wound that had been bleeding for 20 years, ever since the day he threw himself on a grenade to save his entire platoon. Welcome to Warrior Voice. Before we continue this powerful story, tell us in the comments which city in the world you're watching from today. And if you believe stories like this need to be heard, hit that subscribe button to help us bring forgotten voices back into the light. We're growing every day, and your support means everything to us in bringing these untold stories of courage and sacrifice to the world. It was 11:47 p.m. at Mercy General Hospital's emergency department in Seattle. The Pacific Northwest rain drummed against the windows, each drop creating rivulets that caught the neon glow of the hospital's emergency sign. Inside, under harsh fluorescent lights, white tiles gleamed with the antiseptic sheen that spoke of countless emergencies, countless lives hanging in the balance. Dr. Sarah Mitchell was 8 hours into her night shift, and exhaustion had settled into the dark circles under her eyes like unwelcome guests. Her coffee had gone cold an hour ago, forgotten beside a stack of patient charts that seemed to multiply every time she looked away. But after 20 years in emergency medicine, she knew that fatigue was a luxury they couldn't afford. Not here. Not when every minute could mean the difference between life and death. The automatic doors at the entrance bore scuff marks from countless gurneys, wheelchairs, and desperate families who had passed through them seeking hope. Tonight, those doors would open for someone whose story would challenge everything the hospital staff thought they knew about heroism. The automatic doors hissed open with their familiar mechanical sigh, and a figure emerged from the rain-soaked Seattle night. He was a man who had seen too much, carried too much, and lost too much. Yet he walked with the remnants of military bearing that decades of civilian life hadn't quite erased. William Hayes was 65 years old, though the streets had aged him beyond his years. His coat was Army surplus from a decade past, torn at the shoulder where it had caught on a fence 3 nights ago. Beneath it, a flannel shirt hung loose on his diminished frame, and his jeans bore patches that spoke of careful maintenance by someone who understood the value of making things last. His face was weathered like old leather, marked by lines that spoke of time spent outdoors in all seasons. Some lines came from squinting against foreign suns in places most Americans couldn't pronounce. Others came from nights spent awake, listening for sounds that belonged to a different time, a different war. His gray hair fell past his collar, and his beard, though unkempt, was not wild. There was still discipline in his appearance, still the ghost of a soldier who had once stood inspection. But it was his eyes that told the real story. They were the color of storm clouds, and they held the weight of things seen and done in service to a country that had forgotten his name. As he entered the emergency room, his left hand pressed against his abdomen in a gesture that had become unconscious over the years. The pain that had been his constant companion was worse tonight, much worse. When receptionist Jennifer Kim saw the man, she automatically pressed the security button. It wasn't personal, she told herself. It was protocol. In her 5 years working the night shift, she had learned to read the signs, the shuffling gait, the worn clothes, the way some people moved when they were looking for something they couldn't afford. But as William approached the desk, something made her pause. Maybe it was the way he straightened his shoulders as he walked, or the fact that despite his obvious discomfort, he moved with purpose rather than aimlessness. There was something different about this man. Something that didn't quite fit the profile she had learned to recognize. "Excuse me," William said, his voice carrying the rough edge of someone who didn't speak often, but there was respect in his tone, not demand. "I need help." Jennifer studied his face for a moment. His eyes, she noticed, didn't dart around the room, looking for opportunities or escape routes. They met hers directly, with the kind of steady gaze she associated with her grandfather. A man who had taught her that strength wasn't about how loud you could be, but how quietly you could carry your burdens. "Sir, what kind of help do you need?" she asked, her voice professional, but not unkind. Medical help. William replied simply. I think something's wrong inside. It's been getting worse for 3 days. Jennifer hesitated. The man didn't smell of alcohol, didn't show signs of drug use, didn't carry himself with the aggressive desperation she had learned to fear. But his clothes, his appearance, the very fact that he was here at this hour. Do you have identification? She asked. Insurance card? William's weathered hand went to his pocket, and for a moment, hope flickered across his features. Then his shoulders sagged slightly. Lost my wallet a few days ago, he said quietly. Everything was in it. From across the lobby, security guard Marcus Thompson had been watching the interaction with the practiced eye of someone who had worked hospital security for 15 years. Marcus was a good man, fair in his judgments, but he had also learned to spot trouble before it started. Marcus approached the desk with measured steps. Everything okay here, Jennifer? This gentleman is asking for medical assistance, Jennifer said carefully. But he doesn't have identification or insurance information. Marcus nodded, understanding the situation immediately. He turned to William with professional courtesy. Sir, I understand you're looking for help, but without proper documentation, we can't process you through the system. There are social services available. I'm not looking for a handout, William said quietly, but there was steel in his voice now. I'm sick. I think I might be dying. The words hung in the air between them, simple and direct. William hadn't meant them to sound dramatic. They were simply a statement of fact, delivered with the same matter-of-fact tone he might have used to report enemy positions to a commanding officer 40 years ago. From her position at the nurse's station, Dr. Sarah Mitchell had been half listening to the conversation while reviewing lab results from her previous patient. Something about the exchange caught her attention. Perhaps the quiet dignity in the homeless man's voice, or the way he carried himself despite his obvious distress. Dr. Mitchell had seen thousands of patients over her career, and she had developed an intuition about people that went beyond medical symptoms. This man, despite his appearance, didn't fit the usual pattern. There was something in his bearing, something in the way he spoke, that suggested a different story than the one his clothes were telling. She approached the group at the reception desk. What seems to be the problem? She asked, directing the question to William rather than to the staff. William turned to face her, and Dr. Mitchell found herself looking into eyes that had seen things she couldn't imagine. There was pain there, both physical and emotional, but also a strength that spoke of survival, of endurance, of battles fought and won at costs too high to calculate. Ma'am, William said, using the respectful address that had been drilled into him decades ago. I've been having stomach pain for about 3 days. It's getting worse, and I think there might be bleeding. Dr. Mitchell studied his face, noting the pallor beneath the weathered skin, the slight tremor in his hands that could indicate blood loss, the way he favored his left side. These were real symptoms, not the fabricated complaints of someone seeking drugs or attention. How long have you been experiencing these symptoms? She asked. This episode, 3 days, William replied. But the underlying condition, that's been with me for about 20 years. The answer surprised Dr. Mitchell. Most people seeking drugs or shelter would make up a recent onset story. This man was describing a chronic condition with an acute exacerbation, the kind of medical history that suggested real health problems. Mr. she began. Hayes, William said. William Hayes. Mr. Hayes, I'd like to examine you. Would you be willing to come back to an examination room? Marcus shifted uncomfortably. Doctor, he doesn't have ID or insurance. Dr. Mitchell held up a hand. In emergency medicine, we treat first and worry about paperwork later, she said firmly. Mr. Hayes, please follow me. Examination room 3 was like every other examination room in every other hospital, sterile, efficient, and somehow both intimate and impersonal at the same time. A single bed dominated the center of the room, surrounded by medical equipment that hummed quietly in the background. Fluorescent lights cast everything in harsh, revealing detail. As William settled onto the examination table, Dr. Mitchell washed her hands at the small sink in the corner, watching him in the reflection of the mirror above. Even in pain, he maintained perfect posture, his hands resting on his thighs in a position that spoke of military training. When he moved, there was a careful economy of motion, the kind of efficiency that came from years of making every movement count. "Mr. Hayes," Dr. Mitchell said, turning from the sink and putting on examination gloves, "I need to ask you some questions about your medical history." "Yes, ma'am." "Have you been seen by a doctor recently for this condition?" William was quiet for a long moment. "Not recently, no." "When was your last medical care?" Another pause. "It's been a while." Dr. Mitchell recognized evasion when she heard it, but she also recognized shame. Many homeless individuals avoided medical care due to cost, fear, or past bad experiences with the healthcare system. She decided to focus on the immediate problem. "Can you describe the pain you're experiencing?" "Sharp, mostly here," William said, indicating his lower left abdomen. "Sometimes it spreads across my whole stomach. Gets worse when I move certain ways, better when I stay still." "Any nausea? Vomiting?" "Some nausea, no vomiting yet." "Any changes in your bowel movements?" William nodded. "Some blood." Dr. Mitchell's expression grew more serious. Gastrointestinal bleeding could be life-threatening, especially in someone who appeared to have limited access to medical care. "Mr. Hayes, I need to examine your abdomen. Can you remove your shirt?" William hesitated, his hands going to the buttons of his flannel shirt, but not moving to undo them. In that moment of hesitation, Dr. Mitchell saw something she recognized from her work with trauma patients. The reluctance of someone who carried scars they didn't want to explain. "It's okay," she said gently. "I've seen everything. Nothing you show me will shock me." Slowly, William began to unbutton his shirt. As the fabric fell away, Dr. Mitchell had to suppress a gasp. William's torso was a roadmap of violence and survival. Surgical scars crisscrossed his chest and abdomen in patterns that spoke of multiple operations, multiple traumas. Some were old, faded to thin white lines. Others were more recent, angry red marks that suggested ongoing medical problems. But it was the pattern of smaller scars that caught Dr. Mitchell's attention. They were scattered across his chest and arms in irregular clusters, and she recognized them immediately from her rotation in trauma surgery years ago. Shrapnel wounds. Multiple shrapnel wounds. "Mr. Hayes," she said quietly, "these scars, how did you get them?" William's jaw tightened, and for a moment, Dr. Mitchell thought he wouldn't answer. Then, in a voice barely above a whisper, he said, "War." The word hung in the air between them, carrying weight that no medical textbook could adequately describe. Dr. Mitchell had treated veterans before, but she had never seen scarring this extensive, this indicative of severe trauma. "Which war?" she asked gently. "Vietnam," William replied. "Long time ago." Dr. Mitchell nodded and began her physical examination, her hands moving with professional competence across his abdomen. As she palpated the area where William had indicated pain, she felt the irregularities beneath the skin that suggested old injuries, possibly retained foreign objects. His abdomen was distended, tender, and showed signs of possible internal bleeding. "Mr. Hayes, have you ever had surgery to remove shrapnel?" "Some," William said. "Not all. Doctors said some pieces were too close to vital organs, safer to leave them alone." "And they've never caused problems before?" William was quiet for a long moment. "They've always caused problems, I learned to live with it." Dr. Mitchell completed her examination and helped William put his shirt back on. The medical picture was becoming clear. This was a veteran with retained shrapnel, probably suffering from complications related to old wounds. It was a serious condition that required immediate attention. "Mr. Hayes, I need to run some tests. Blood work, probably a CT scan. This could be serious." "Doctor," William said, "I appreciate what you're trying to do, but I can't pay for tests. I don't have insurance, don't have money for." "Let me worry about that," Dr. Mitchell said firmly. "Right now, my concern is making sure you don't die in my emergency room." An hour later, the results confirmed Dr. Mitchell's worst fears. William's hemoglobin levels were dangerously low, indicating significant blood loss. His white blood cell count was elevated, suggesting infection. Most concerning of all, the CT scan showed clear evidence of internal bleeding, apparently caused by movement of retained shrapnel fragments. Dr. Mitchell studied the images on her computer screen with growing alarm. The shrapnel pieces, which had apparently remained stable for decades, had shifted. One fragment in particular had moved close to a major blood vessel, and it appeared to be causing active bleeding. She returned to room 3 to find William sitting in exactly the same position, hands on his thighs, staring straight ahead with the 1,000-yard stare she had read about, but never really understood until now. "Mr. Hayes, I have your test results. You have active internal bleeding caused by movement of shrapnel fragments. You need surgery immediately." William nodded calmly, as if he had been expecting this news. "How risky?" "Every surgery has risks, but this is necessary. Without it, the bleeding could become life-threatening." "I understand," William said. "Doctor, before we do this, I need to tell you something." "What is it?" William slowly reached into his back pocket and pulled out a worn leather wallet. From it, he extracted papers that had been folded and refolded so many times they were beginning to tear along the creases. He handed them to Dr. Mitchell without a word. Dr. Mitchell unfolded the papers carefully. They were military citations, official documents bearing the seal of the United States Army. The first was a citation for the Purple Heart, awarded to Sergeant William Hayes for wounds received in action against an enemy of the United States. Below that was another citation, this one for the Bronze Star with V device for valor, awarded for conspicuous gallantry and intrepidity in action against a hostile enemy. But it was the third citation that made Dr. Mitchell's breath catch. It was for the Silver Star, one of the nation's highest awards for valor, awarded to Sergeant William Hayes for gallantry in action against an enemy of the United States while serving with the 101st Airborne Division in the Republic of Vietnam. "Mr. Hayes," Dr. Mitchell said quietly, "do you understand what these represent? You're a decorated war hero." William took the papers back and folded them carefully. "I'm a man who did his job and got lucky enough to survive it." "Can you tell me what happened? How you earned these medals?" William's eyes unfocused, seeing something that existed only in memory, something from decades in the past, but as immediate as yesterday. "March 18th, 1973, William began, his voice taking on the measured cadence of someone recounting events he had relived countless times. "We were on patrol near Khe Sanh, checking out reports of enemy movement in the area. Intelligence said the area was clear, but intelligence was wrong a lot in those days." He paused, his eyes unfocused, seeing something that existed only in memory. "We walked into an ambush, came out of nowhere. First thing I knew, Rodriguez was down, then Martinez. The rest of us took cover behind some rocks, but we were pinned down pretty good. That's when I saw the grenade." Another pause, longer this time. "It landed right in the middle of where my squad was taking cover. 5 guys all bunched up because that's all the cover there was. Rodriguez, Martinez, Johnson, Williams, and Smith. I was maybe 10 feet away, separated from them by open ground." Dr. Mitchell found herself holding her breath. "I had maybe 2 seconds to decide. Leave them there and watch them die, or throw yourself on the grenade," Dr. Mitchell finished quietly. William nodded. "Seemed like the obvious choice at the time. Still does. What happened after that? Obviously you survived." "Barely. The explosion did most of this," he said, gesturing to his scarred torso. "Tore me up pretty good, but it was angled just right, and my body armor absorbed some of it. Still, I spent the next 6 months in various hospitals, had multiple surgeries to remove shrapnel, repair organs. And the other men? All 5 lived. Rodriguez retired as a master sergeant. Martinez became a teacher. Johnson went into construction. Williams and Smith, I kept track of them over the years, even though I never contacted them." Dr. Mitchell felt tears forming in her eyes. "But after the war, didn't you receive support, medical care for your injuries? The VA should have." William's laugh was bitter. "Should have is a big phrase, Doctor. Yes, I should have received support, should have gotten regular medical care, should have been helped to transition back to civilian life. What happened? What happened is that I came home to a country that didn't want to hear about Vietnam. What happened is that when I went to the VA for help with nightmares and pain, I got put on waiting lists and given forms to fill out. What happened is that my wife couldn't handle the man who came back, because he wasn't the same man who left. What happened is that I started drinking to make the pain stop, and when that didn't work, I started drinking to make everything stop. And when my wife left and took my kids with her, I decided maybe it was better if I just disappeared." "But you sobered up," Dr. Mitchell observed. "You're clean now." "Been sober for 8 years, William said. It took me 12 years on the streets to figure out that drowning my problems in alcohol wasn't actually drowning them. Problem was, by the time I got clean, I'd lost everything else. Family, friends, any chance of a normal life. The surgery lasted 4 hours. Dr. Mitchell, though not a surgeon herself, was allowed to observe due to her role as the admitting physician. The surgical team, led by Dr. Robert Chen, worked with meticulous care to locate and remove the shifted shrapnel fragment. "Look at this," Dr. Chen said during the operation, pointing to the scarring patterns revealed by the incision. "This man has been carrying metal fragments in his body for decades." The surgical work done originally was remarkable for its time, but some of these pieces were deemed too dangerous to remove. "And now?" Dr. Mitchell asked. "Now they're moving, causing problems. We'll remove what we can safely, but some will have to stay. He's going to need ongoing medical care for the rest of his life." When the surgery was finally complete, William was moved to the intensive care unit. Dr. Mitchell sat beside his bed, watching the monitors that tracked his vital signs, waiting for him to wake up. William woke up 18 hours after surgery to find Dr. Mitchell sitting beside his bed, reading through what appeared to be a large folder of documents. "How do you feel?" she asked, setting the folder aside. "Like I've been run over by a tank," William said, his voice hoarse from the breathing tube. "But alive, thank you." The surgery went well. Dr. Chen was able to remove the fragment that was causing the bleeding. "You're going to be okay." William nodded, then noticed the folder. "What's all that?" Dr. Mitchell hesitated. "Mr. Hayes, I took some liberties while you were in surgery. I hope you don't mind, but I made some phone calls." "What kind of phone calls?" "First, I contacted the Department of Veterans Affairs. I wanted to understand why you weren't receiving the medical care and benefits you're entitled to." William's expression darkened. "Doctor, I've been down that road." "The problem wasn't your eligibility," Dr. Mitchell continued. "The problem was that you were lost in the system. When you became homeless, you lost your permanent address. When you lost your address, the VA lost track of you. Your benefits have been sitting unclaimed for years." William stared at her. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying that you're entitled to full medical coverage, disability benefits, and housing assistance. You have been for decades. The system failed you, but we can fix that." Dr. Mitchell opened the folder and pulled out several documents. "I also made another call to the local news. There's a reporter named Lisa Park who specializes in veterans issues. She wants to tell your story." William looked alarmed. "Doctor, I don't want publicity. I just want to be left alone." "Mr. Hayes, with respect, being left alone is what got you into this situation. Your story needs to be told, not for your sake, but for the sake of other veterans who might be in similar situations. How many other decorated veterans are living on the streets right now? How many other heroes has the system forgotten? Your story could help us find them, help us fix the problems that allowed this to happen." William was quiet for a long time, considering her words. Finally, he nodded. "If it helps other veterans, then okay, but I don't want to be portrayed as some kind of victim. I made choices." "You survived a war, Mr. Hayes. You threw yourself on a grenade to save others. No one is going to portray you as anything other than what you are, a hero." 3 days later, Lisa Park's story aired on Cairo 7 News. The segment, titled "The Forgotten Hero," told William's story with sensitivity and respect, focusing not on his homelessness, but on his heroism, and the system failures that had led to his situation. The response was immediate and overwhelming. Within hours of the broadcast, the hospital's phone system was jammed with calls from viewers wanting to help. Local veterans organizations mobilized to assist other homeless veterans. The VA announced an immediate review of procedures for tracking veterans who had lost permanent addresses. But the most meaningful response came from 5 phone calls that Dr. Mitchell received personally. "Dr. Mitchell, this is Master Sergeant Carlos Rodriguez, retired. I saw the story about William Hayes. Is it true?" "Yes, Sergeant Rodriguez, it's true. Ma'am, Bill Hayes saved my life 50 years ago. I've been looking for him ever since, trying to find a way to thank him. Is it possible for me to see him?" Similar calls came from Martinez in Phoenix, Johnson in Denver, Williams in Portland, and Smith in San Francisco. All 5 men had been trying for decades to find William, to thank him, to help him if he needed it. "Mr. Hayes," Dr. Mitchell said when she told him about the calls, "your brothers want to see you." William's eyes filled with tears. "After all this time, they never forgot what you did. They never forgot you." The reunion took place in the hospital's family conference room a week later. 5 men, now in their late 60s and early 70s, had traveled from across the country to see the man who had saved their lives half a century ago. Dr. Mitchell watched from the doorway as William, still weak from surgery but dressed in clean clothes donated by hospital staff, entered the room. The 5 men stood as one, coming to attention in a gesture of respect that transcended decades and rank. For a moment, no one spoke. Then Carlos Rodriguez, tears streaming down his face, stepped forward. "Bill," he said simply, "we've been looking for you." What followed was an emotional reunion that spoke to bonds forged in combat and tested by time. The 5 men told William how they had searched for him, how they had tried to repay the debt they felt they owed him. They told him about their families, their careers, their lives that had been possible because of his sacrifice. "Bill," said Martinez, "we have something for you." From a briefcase he pulled out a thick folder. "We've been collecting this for 30 years. News articles about your heroism, copies of military records, letters from our commanding officers. We wanted to make sure your story was preserved. But more than that," added Johnson, "we've been setting aside money, all of us, for when we found you." "We can't give you back the years you lost," said Williams, "but we can make sure you never want for anything again." "We're your family now," said Smith. "We always were, but now we can actually be here for you." William sat in stunned silence, overwhelmed by the outpouring of love and gratitude from men he hadn't seen in 5 decades. These weren't strangers offering charity, these were his brothers, offering family. Within months, William's story had inspired major changes at multiple levels. The Department of Veterans Affairs announced reforms to their procedures for tracking and assisting homeless veterans, including new database systems and outreach programs specifically designed to locate veterans who had lost permanent addresses. Mercy General Hospital launched the Veteran Recognition Program, training staff to identify veterans who might be seeking medical care and connecting them with appropriate resources. The program became a model that was adopted by hospitals across the country. But the most meaningful change was in William's own life. 6 months after his surgery, he was living in a comfortable apartment in a Seattle suburb, paid for by VA disability benefits that had been retroactively applied. The 5 men whose lives he had saved had insisted on supplementing his government benefits, creating a trust fund that ensured he would never face financial hardship again. More importantly, William was no longer alone. His 5 brothers visited regularly, and their families had embraced him as an honorary uncle and grandfather. For the first time in decades, William had people who cared about him, people who valued him not for what he could provide, but for who he was. Dr. Mitchell continued to serve as his primary physician, monitoring his ongoing health issues and managing the chronic pain from his old injuries. But their relationship had evolved beyond doctor and patient. They had become genuine friends. "How are you adjusting to having a home again?" Dr. Mitchell asked during one of his follow-up appointments. "It's strange," William admitted. "For so long I lived one day at a time, 1 hour at a time. Now I can plan for the future again. I can think beyond just surviving to the next morning." "What are your plans?" William smiled, an expression that had become more common as his health improved and his circumstances stabilized. "I want to stay here and help. I want to work with the hospital's Veteran Recognition Program. I want to make sure what happened to me doesn't happen to others." "You're not content to just be rescued. You want to become part of the solution." "I've been rescued by others my whole life," William said. "First by the medics who pulled me out of that rice paddy, then by you when you decided to look past appearances, then by my brothers who never forgot me. Maybe it's time I did some rescuing of my own." 1 year after William's surgery, Mercy General Hospital held a special ceremony in its main lobby. A plaque was being unveiled to honor William Hayes and all veterans who had served with distinction. The ceremony was attended by William's 5 brothers and their families, hospital staff, local veterans groups, and members of the media. But the most meaningful presence was that of 3 other homeless veterans whom William had helped identify and connect with VA services over the past year. William approached the podium slowly, still somewhat uncomfortable with public attention but understanding its importance. He wore a simple suit, donated by Rodriguez, and for the first time in decades, he looked like the decorated veteran he had always been. "Thank you," he began, his voice steady despite the emotion in his eyes. "A year ago, I came to this hospital thinking I was dying. In some ways I was. I was dying from isolation, from being forgotten, from carrying burdens that I thought I had to carry alone." He paused, looking out at the faces in the crowd, seeing his brothers, seeing Dr. Mitchell, seeing the other veterans whose lives had been changed by his story. "But Dr. Mitchell and the staff here did more than save my life. They reminded me that I had value, that my service mattered, that I didn't have to face my battles alone. They gave me back my identity." William's voice grew stronger as he continued. "I'm not here today to be celebrated. I'm here to remind all of us that there are heroes walking among us every day. They might not look like what we expect. They might be wearing torn clothes instead of uniforms, carrying invisible wounds instead of visible medals. But they're there, and they deserve our recognition, our respect, and our support." 3 years later, William Hayes continues to work as a veterans advocate in Seattle. The Forgotten Heroes Project, started by the 5 men whose lives he saved, has assisted thousands of homeless veterans nationwide. This story inspired legislative changes that prevent veterans from being lost in administrative systems. Dr. Mitchell continues practicing emergency medicine, but she has also become a national speaker on recognizing veterans in medical settings. "William taught me that being a good doctor means seeing the whole person," she often tells audiences. But perhaps the most lasting impact is found in the countless moments when someone chooses to look a little deeper, listen a little longer, or extend a helping hand to someone who appears forgotten. Because somewhere among those overlooked faces might be another hero, waiting for someone to see past appearances to the courage that lies beneath. William Hayes threw himself on a grenade to save 5 men 50 years ago. But his real heroism might be found in how he used his own rescue to become a rescuer of others, transforming personal redemption into a mission of service that continues to save lives today. This story was brought to you by Warrior Voice. We tell these stories to remind us that heroism comes in many forms, and that our responsibility to each other doesn't end when the uniform comes off. Have you ever encountered someone whose story was deeper than their appearance suggested? Have you ever been surprised by discovering the history of someone you initially overlooked? Share your experiences in the comments below. If stories like this move you, please subscribe to our channel and share this video with others, because there are more forgotten heroes out there, and their stories deserve to be told. From all of us at Warrior Voice, thank you for watching, thank you for caring, and thank you for remembering that everyone has a story worth hearing. Until next time, keep your eyes open for the heroes walking among us. They might not look like what you expect, but they're there, waiting for someone to see them.